introduce it?
Yeah, I could introduce it. So, hey, y'all. We back. We in here, me and Catherine. And today we're going to be talking about legacy. Ooh, what that means, what that looks like, our very controversial opinions on legacy and Jujutsu Kaisen. So, yeah, when I was thinking about this, I was really thinking about Yuji Itadori because, like, off rip from first episode, his grandpa passes away. Sorry, spoiler. I don't know. We just watched the first episode, um, and
It's literally in the opening.
it's literally like 5 seconds in. Like, come on, guys. So his grandpa passes away, and he's basically like, "I need you to create a legacy. I need you to make sure that people like you. You are surrounded by people at your death. Basically, don't have a whack ass death like me." That's kind of what I heard. But yeah, and so that really got me thinking, like, what does it mean? Because throughout the show, we kind of see Yuji go back to that moment, and that it really is the basis for a lot of his actions, where he, ultimately gets inhabited by Sukuna and other things. And so I was just like, how is legacy very ego driven? This desire to want something for yourself as opposed to other people, when really, like, legacy is the idea of passing on to other people. So kind of reconciling the ego and also thinking about the future and the ways in which that happens, because, like, we read the actual definition of legacy, and that has to do with the material passing down through the generations. Um, and thinking about that, it feels really limited in how we conceptualize legacy, and also, like, how we try to build legacy. Capitalism sucks, but I think, like, that definition is very much rooted in capitalism, like the idea of building, not but building materially, and not the ways in which we create impact, like socially, communally, in ways. So yeah.
I mean, I think I kind of want to ask you, do you want a legacy?
Do I think I want positive impact, but I don't know if that's necessarily the same as legacy, if that makes sense. Like, I want people to, I want to break generational curses, and I think in and of it itself, that's a legacy that I'm trying to disrupt. But I don't know if I'm passing that down necessarily. Like, I don't know if I want kids, and so does me not wanting kids, does that mean I can't create legacy? Because I feel like a lot of the times that's how we think about legacy, is like in terms of future generations. But is it just future generations that I am personally able to create, or also other generations that I'm able to connect with, if that makes sense? I think that, like, I might create one unintentionally, but I don't necessarily, like, that's not my goal. My goal is to have positive impact, if that makes sense, in whatever ways I can. But I don't know if that necessarily is legacy.
But then I want to go into what you said, generational curse, and we're dealing with the show that's centered in curses.
Yeah.
And this is me being, I guess, devil's advocate, or just kind of thinking the placement of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to break generational curses, and there's this vocabulary of legacy, generational wealth, generational curses, and you have, look, I cannot pronounce names, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I forget my name all the time.
Right.
I probably have a condition I don't know about. I don't have insurance. I don't know what to tell you. Anywho's, I just had a brain fart. Okay, we're back. We have this pink hair guy, Itadori.
Yes.
Who swallows a finger. And it may just be weird, but we love it. And the I guess we don't know how it ends yet. But the whole purpose of him swallowing, and then not only just going into the school, and his goal as a student is to collect all the fingers, is, I mean, essentially predicting, I guess, but I think it's kind of assumed, to end the curse because he's the most like powerful curse. Like I think he's like the god or something. Like he's like a very powerful curse. The what's his name?
Sukuna?
Sukuna, Suki. Yeah. Suki. Uh, he is the most powerful. So but in order for him to like form to destroy him, they need all the fingers. Mm-hmm. So in essence, Itadori, pink hair, is breaking a curse, like what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So why? I think maybe the question is the deep, or going into it deeper. What's the pressure, right? What's your why?
Right.
And I want to get into that more.
Yeah, because I think when thinking about Itadori's why, it seems a little more him focused. Like he wants to create this impact so that he can be surrounded by people during his death that love him / admire him. Less about, I want to break this curse so that no one has to endure this curse anymore. And that's kind of like the thing that I was looking at early on in this season. I was like, okay, like valid, like live your life for you, for, you know, what you want for yourself, valid, but also thinking more about bigger picture, like, yes, this is about you, but also this is about other people. And like the way in which he views his role in shaping the future seems less about like the future necessarily and more about him in the present. If that makes sense.
There's two things that I'm catching on to, and I think one is you said present, and I think that this, like, they should all exist. Like, you should. I personally believe I am definitely a Gen Zer of like you should totally like do whatever you want, nihilism, be completely selfish. And when you're doing that though, and I think this is when alignment and spirituality for me comes in my experience, you're gonna affect someone unconsciously, whether good or bad. Depends who you are and who you want to be. Personally, like the way I see legacy, what my mind immediately goes to is your character. Yeah. Whether you're dead or alive, doesn't matter. Like how you treat people is your legacy to me, because there's a lot of people with money who are just disgusting, and there are people with money who are not. So I'm thinking about how, like, so be selfish, do what you want, but at the same time, I think there's two things, right? The why, right? He's doing it because his grandfather told him, and his grandfather was basically his only parental figure in his life, according to what we've seen so far. And this is part of me being very selfish, so warning, but I feel like a part of it too, it's like, yes, be there for your family and your loved ones, of course. Like subconsciously, if you love people, you're gonna unconsciously do things for them. People call that unconditional, but I hate vocabulary. Like, call it whatever you want. But if you're gonna tell someone, because like it's not without a question. Like, I'm gonna be there for Kolbi because I love Kolbi. Mm-hmm. There's no why. I love Kolbi. Simple. Like, you don't have to have the why, and that's my point. And if you do have a why, that's great. But there's gonna get to a point in your life as you get older where your why becomes questionable because you didn't put yourself first. Does that make sense? Like, all of these things exist at the same time. So it's like you have your grandfather who passed away, and of course it impacts him. He's left alone. Basically, Gojo adopts him too. And he's also 15. Like, we forget these anime people are like teenagers. Like, puberty, you stink, your armpits must be disgusting. Like, it's just definitely a vision. So there's that. And I'm sure as he gets older, like any person, you begin to really reflect on who you were, who you want to be, and you essentially come to the conclusion, at least for me, I speak for myself, that just living right now is exactly where I want to be. Make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I definitely agree. Like, I think that both need to exist and can exist. And I do think you need to do things for yourself first and foremost, because ultimately, like, you're living for you. Like, you inhabit this body, you're working, you're doing everything in this body for you. And you should make sure that that is a large part of your motivating factor, because doing everything for other people, ultimately, what does that mean?
Yeah.
you know. Um, so I agree in that way, and I think that legacy is also associated with other people, and so sometimes it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
balance the two of like your ego, which I honestly like don't really believe in ego death, but that's like another topic.
This is why Kolbi is my soulmate, and I'm gonna buy you what's it called? A Tessie, like Tesla Tessie. Kolbi. That was so corny.
The edit. Um,
Look it out.
but yeah, I think that ego can exist. My thing with thinking about Itadori was also I was watching it at the same time that I was watching Akame got killed, and so to have the like the end. Sorry, spoiler, but it has to happen for me to explain what I'm trying to say.
This is another show or one of these about that fucking show. That
So
show.
good. I want to thank Gator the Royale for putting me on because chef's kiss. Anyway, but at the end, they do all this, they make a huge impact basically. And then the narrator is basically like, and nobody remembers who they are. And so then I was sitting there like, wow, like, because like ego is so important, I'm like, damn, like, if I did all of this and nobody even knows my name, like, what? Did I even do anything? Like, it's like if what's that saying? Like if a tree falls in the wood, did it make a sound? Like did it exist? And so I was sitting there and I was like, no, of course it exists. Like it happens. Someone was impacted by it. They don't know why, how, what for, but it's still very important that this change occurred. But it's just like if you can't point to the root, how important is it? How important are you? And so that's just what had me thinking. Like, I think Itadori is doing a great job. Like, he's the man. He's that nigga in the show.
That's
Like,
annoying though. Like, how do you? I don't remember. How are you so athletic but you never work out?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just kind of like he's just
He's
the
an
perfect
Naruto.
character. But yeah, he's just the perfect character. But he's doing all of this, and it's clearly ego driven. But then I'm thinking, like, what if nobody remembered him? Like, then everything was for naught in his case because like it's about him. Like if ultimately he ends up dying with nobody around him.
But to be very honest, I'm gonna sound like a very direct person, and this might come off rude.
Mm-hmm.
But you're dead. Who cares? Like how? I guess the thing, like I'm thinking right now as you're saying this, like even for like myself or like for anyone, like we're so like we, especially on social media, this whole talk about legacy and generation. Well, I have to have 10 side hustles. I gotta work 24 hours. It's kind of like girl boss rhetoric, and it's like you're gonna die. Like, and let's say you did everything. You checked every box. You uh moved up the social economic ladder. You own property. You have a car. You have multiple businesses and equities. Let's say you have a beautiful white picket fence family. Let's say you die. You don't know what happens to that generational wealth. Unfortunately, there are cases where families, because it's new money, they don't know what to do with it, so it all goes to waste. To be honest, not everyone, but sometimes that does happen. Like you're dead. Why do you care? And I sound like an asshole, but it's just like you're dead. Like just rest in peace. Like that's what I'm saying. Like maybe it's part of it is always semantics. So what maybe and I think this is why I love I cannot even pronounce the title. Jujutsu Kaisen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
Um
Bilingual island. Yeah.
uh I love it's a phenomenal anime. I think it's granted it's definitely sticking to the formula of every other fucking shonen anime. However, I think it's great because first of all the characters are definitely developed way more than previous animes. That's just the generation is changing. But the three friendships I think are representative of three different kinds of legacies that intertwine. And I think it's news broke out that the creator is sick. So hopefully, and if you doesn't want to finish it, you don't have to finish it either. Like these creators from manga anime be really working there to the bone. And if you don't have to do it if you don't want. I feel bad, but you're. But I feel like they have a phenomenal dynamic, and I'm excited and curious of how it's gonna end because I feel like it's gonna really reshape this definition of legacy. So, like for example, we have pink hair dude who's just, he's a perfect character. He's like a he's the okay. This is such a pick me comment, but he's the guy you bring to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
But like he's super social. He's friendly. Like if you see a new person, he'll happy to like. He's a great guy. He's and also like he's alright. I mean, but like he's like good looking. He's fit. Like he has all of these qualities. Where you want to take him to prom. That'd be the perfect prom date, Then you have the emo kid. Mujigen. He emo. And his legacy is more generational curses internalized. It's more so like, did you read the manga?
No. You say yes. Okay.
I need to catch up, but have you seen the backstory of his father and his family? His father looked good too. We love them evil kings. If he had some good looking character, I'd be like,
no, Jujutsu Kaisen full of pretty people, just pretty characters all around.
Oof. And I don't know, like it's always been the case, but it's like what's the word? Expedited? Is that a word?
Yeah, it is. But that means like fast.
Yeah. I love like a deep voice. Like I can't do it. And like most of the characters be having like mad deep voices. I'd be like, but anywho's, while the pink hair guy is external and more about his environment, emo kid is like internal. And then I think also I'm biased. I think it's Nairobi.
Nabar, yeah.
The baddest bitch alive. I love her.
Nabara.
Like, what was I say? Nabara?
Yeah.
Forgive me,
Oh,
please. I'm from New York. I'm from the Bronx, okay? But literally, like, I think she is kind of the legacy that we are trying to reach or trying to determine, because she just does not care. She does what she wants. She's a person, and her legacy, like she's also like trying to figure out what happened to her friend. Her backstory about the girl that she met that got her into killing curses or whatever. But when you read the manga, you know the truth. Oof. Girl, read that manga. I could say this is probably super biased, but when it comes to like anime versus animation, which is more Western, like Western Eastern, it's problematic as hell. But here we are. I feel like anime is like whether it's Hunter x Hunter, whether it's Jujutsu Kaisen, whether it's Attack on Titan, like even though they definitely have a formula, the way Disney has a formula, they're still so complex psychologically. Like the way they be lining stuff up, and it don't feel like a soap opera. It ain't like, oh, you F my best friend. It's like some deep stuff that feels so real. But here we are. So I think she embodies the present legacy, like that move she does in anime with the nail.
Oh yes, yeah.
Like that moment was a moment of legacy. She's a present legacy. Emo kid is internal, and pink hair guy is external. And I think they are a combination of different kinds of legacies and how to live your life, basically. And I think it's a testament that legacy can be whatever you want it to be. In my personal opinion, when it comes to anything after life, for you specifically, the individual, why do you care? You're fucking dead. Obviously, be a good person, and and I think we take for granted the small things that really impact a life. Like I think, for example, for me, I'll say one example. I'll stop talking. Long story short, I had resigned from a job, very abusive environment. It was not. It was just disrespectful. But by me making action for myself, fearlessly, because it was a situation where resigning was like problematic for some reason, because apparently I'm owned. There was a person I was working with who also resigned. It became a domino effect. And I think, and now they're in a position that they're much happier at. So it often takes you doing an action that's not considered a big deal. Everyone resigns all the time. People come and go in jobs. But that small action can impact someone's life decision. That's in a legacy. But you know it or not. So
No, yeah, that's like big facts. Like, I'm thinking about that because so much of like legacy history is really just people doing shit like for themselves. Like, not really sure they're thinking about other people, but in that moment, they're just like, no, this is what I want to do. Um, you know, Rosa Parks, even though she's not the first one, wasn't really thinking about, oh, hey, let me start the whole civil rights movement. She said, no, my feet are tired. I want to sit down. You know, like but here we are years later, decades later, talking about her and her legacy from that. Now, there's a whole lot of politics that also play into why her legacy is known over others. But, you know, the thing, it still applies here. And
or like Michael Jackson, Beyonce.
Yeah, Beyonce, like, they're really just people doing things for themselves. Like, Beyonce likes her song, so she released her album the way she wants to release her album, and everybody loves it. And she's created legacy because she be making bops, she be making hit after hit. She an entertainer, she does her thing. Like, she's good at her job.
Shorty eat apples in air. Like, that's crazy.
Right. She a Virgo queen doing Virgo things, period.
Virgo
And
woman.
here, hey, bow down, bitches. And she's created a legacy that's beyond her. And I don't even think like 18-year-old Beyonce could have seen that for her, like how big she is off of just being Beyonce, you know? Same thing with Rihanna, other people. So I do think that there's a part of legacy that is super unintentional, but that's very authentic about the way you are as a person, you know, whatever it is. And I think capturing that authenticity is also a huge part of legacy building, because like trying to be whoever for whatever, it's just not gonna work for nobody. But I find the people that have like the biggest legacies are people that just kind of did stuff that was authentic to them and their vision, their selves, in whatever ways that is best suited for them. So if you want to like live your legacy because you want mad kids, do that, as long as that's authentic to you, you know, to me, but to you. You know, if you if you want to go start this nonprofit, that's good for you too. Like, if you want to make dope art, that's for you too. But I think being authentic is a huge part of legacy, and like not chasing other people's versions of legacy is also really important, especially now when we're fed certain definitions of what legacy means and how to go about creating it. I think it's really important that we determine what we want for ourselves first and foremost, if that makes sense. And really sit with who we are as people to make sure we're just living life authentically to whatever that means, because that's honestly, that shit is hard regardless. Living an authentic life is really difficult.
Don't do it. Okay, I don't want to be the negative Nancy. I don't, but I will in 2 seconds. Um, and I'm learning this now. And no shade, no shade. But again, legacy is it's part of an identity, right? Your identity is to you and your experiences and how people view, etc. For some people, a legacy to them is a 9 to 5 job, a kid, 2 kids, a white picket fence, and a partner, and that's it. That's what they want. That's their achieved goal, and that's beautiful. Why? Because you want it. What you want is not my business. It don't pay me. Don't know it. I want to say though, at least from my interactions with individuals, especially coming from an immigrant family and immigrant background, um, there's a sense of obligation. There's this sense of I have to do things because that's all I know. Not necessarily because you have to and you feel, but it's like it's been literally generational from down to down. You take care of your elders when you get when you get older, whatever. Like there's a certain like respectability politics within cultures that's there's no question of it. And I'm gonna be the asshole of the hour, and I'm gonna question it. I think for me, and I say this, and I kind of had this epiphany. I remember, just long story short, all of school, and until like a year or two out of school, I remember like the only option afforded to me was education because it was free and available, and I literally got it for free. So for me, the only way, quote unquote, the whole idea of like getting out of the hood and wanting a better life is also this rhetoric that's very anti-black too. Not anti-black, I don't want to say that, but this is sort of like shaming of like what it is to be a low-income black person. It's like you need to get out the hood. Like this is whole like culture of it. But I'm not gonna get to that. But I just remember like I had that kind of like I hated being in the Bronx. I hated, I remember just like working so hard in school to the point where I was hospitalized. I got alopecia, being diagnosed with anxiety and all of these things because I was just drowning in trying to at least get into college for me. It was at least. That was the bare minimum. And I remember just like, visiting or like having a college list like in 5th grade. Like I was so determined to go to school because that was the only option provided and that was the only way out, quote unquote. But I was doing it because that's what everyone, like that's what success looked like because no one else did it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I put that obligation on myself. That's all I knew. As I got older, I'm never gonna forget this feeling, and not to be grateful. Like I'm so honestly, I'm happy that not only that I went to college, but I went to college that I went to. I went for free, and I'm happy that like I met phenomenal people like you through that, institution unnamed. I got to travel. Like I've done amazing things, and I'm grateful. But I'm never gonna forget the feeling of being in graduation ceremony, being in that beautiful crowd in my, expensive ass outfit. I spent, okay, nail did, hair did. I'm a mermaid looking ass bitch, okay, bomb, period. And being there, and I was like, that's it. That's it. I literally was balding. Like, I went through some serious like social anxiety situations because like I was just trying to fit into what I was told. So the point is, I'm trying to say like our legacies. Like I also give grace too. I was young. I don't know. You from the hood. You just don't know. And that's fine. But I think your legacy won't come to you at 18. It won't come to you after college. It probably won't come to you until you're like 40, 50. It probably never will come. You don't have to know a why. You don't have to know anything. And just know if you would like to, there's always an option. There's always a way. There's something there. We have to acknowledge our agency. And I think a lot of people don't acknowledge it for, reasonably so because of history and, racism. Hey, happy Juneteenth. Reasonably so. But it takes that, honestly, in my person, for me, it took a lot of that internal, spiritual, like, facing some serious demons and to recognize I'm actually a very insecure person because I'm going to therapy about this, but like having to constantly like for what's his name, Itatoria, pink hair.
Yeah.
Like it's a constant approval from his grandfather. For me, it's a constant approval from my mother. Like, am I good enough? Am I holding up to the standards I had for the people who in my family and waiting for me in the island? So, like, there's a sense of obligations, and because you're this constant cycle, it really takes some dark moments, and for me, it did at least, to break it and see something different for the first time. Not to say like if you want to go to college, but don't think it's the end of be all. Don't end up in the hospital because you got a bad grade. Don't lose your hair. Who cares about college? It doesn't define you. Or even just like thinking about the work environment, like these big company brands, everyone wants, even for me, like I wanted to work at Google and all of these fancy name brands. But to be honest with you, the reason why you're not getting the job is because you don't want to work there. You just want to work there because of the name, the way you apply for college. Let's be honest. And they see that through you, which is why you didn't get the job. Sorry to be the asshole. I'm not a recruiter, but that's happened to me. Like I was so adamant about being in a particular kind of company because it looked good on LinkedIn. And the reality is like people can, like this, and I think kind of turning into this conversation with legacy is like the capitalism portion of it. Legacy is very intertwined with capitalism. It's a production, literally, through children on Instagram with PPP loans. Like it's a literal production. And I'm gonna just read and you can give me your thoughts about the capitalism of legacy and how that affects us and how and for a lot of people, it's not possible for them to take the moment and think about, oh, legacy can be something different. A lot of people can't say that. And that's just the reality. And honestly, I don't know what to say about that. This is me probably being a pessimist. But the definition according to Google is as a noun, an amount of money or property left to someone in a will. As an adjective, denoting or relating to software or hardware that has been whatever. The noun is basically literally says an amount of money or property left. So
yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on what you said. So I think that I agree. I think that so much of legacy and the way we're taught about legacy is just like been passed on through generation. Like education, at least for me, like was a big part of gaining legacy. And I think a lot of that has to do with the ways in which like class is intertwined in that. So, when you're poor, it's hard to feel agency, in a lot of different ways. And agency is really, really tied to legacy, which is what we've been saying. Like it's a lot about your choice, your decisions to do things. And when you're poor, it feels like you're not doing things out of choice. Like it's just, sometimes it just feels like this is what you're doing because you have to in order to survive. And education feels like the way out of that a little bit, as in like you're able to have more financial freedom to do a little bit more things, even if the path that we're doing is inherently restrictive. So I think that that's why, thinking about it, like education has been so tied to like you need to do this in order to create a legacy, because like you're poor, how else are you going to be able to not be poor, basically. And thinking about that, and then also capitalism, that definition that you created, it makes sense on why that would be the way we think about it. Like if we're going to try to create materials that we can pass on, the way to get it is to make money, and the way to make money is to get an education. And so therefore you better go get them A's and get that degree and go to school for free. So now that's what we are thinking. And then on top of that, we see these huge, basically monopolies, tech monopolies, business monopolies. And we're like, boom, that's where the money is. That's where I need to be. So I can go, make that legacy, make those material things that, right? But honestly, what this pandemic has really showed me is like, when I didn't get my graduation, I said, what was this? What was all this for? Did I do anything at all? Nobody came to clap for me. Like, and then I sat there and I was like, but you did it anyway. Like, you still did it. Same as class of 2019, 2018. You didn't get the rah shit. So it doesn't feel the same. You know what I mean? And so ultimately it just had me thinking about like, okay, like, what does that mean that you're not fulfilled from this? That you finishing this task didn't bring you that much joy to begin with, and then how does that mean about how I want to live my life in the future and what I do, and what things are important to me. And so that also made me think about that. And then also this pandemic gives you a lot of time to think about yourself, your family, the people you're living in relation to. And then you realize that legacy is so much bigger than like the material stuff, you know, because now you're sitting here with your grandma and your mom and you're seeing those toxic traits that led to that, or even the good traits that led to that. You're like, oh, that's great, cool, I do that too. And then you're like, oh, that's not good, and I do that too. And so now you're seeing legacy in a whole different framework of, okay, they didn't just pass down these material things, they passed down these emotional, mental, you know, spiritual things that I haven't even taken the time to unpack and really think about, like, what that means for me as a person. So I think that like this pandemic has really shifted the way I think about legacy in general, especially like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like really figuring that out and figuring out like the spiritual legacies that are held within, you know, my like Caribbean background. It's so big, but you know, oftentimes we just think about it, especially because of like, you know, the way colonialism is set up and Christianity is set up. We're thinking about like the legacy of Christianity within our, you know, things, not necessarily about the very West African spiritual legacies that are within our superstitions, the way in which we cook our food, like that kind of thing. And so that really made me think about it. Like, I can't point to who in my family, you know, took the tradition from West Africa and came here, but it's here, you know, that legacy is still very much intact. I can't point to the person that, you know, who decided that we were gonna cut our hair on only on full moons and new moons. I don't know who decided to do that, but it's something that we continue in our family, and it's something that is very much a legacy that is passed on from generation to generation. And what does that mean to hold on to certain ones, and then what does it mean to break that? I think that that's something I've thought a lot about. And then thinking about Jujutsu Kaisen, like Gojo, he is so anti like the traditions, like anti the legacy. Like that old man, he's like, no, old man, like we're not doing that no more. That's not for me. And thinking about Gojo and thinking about like my relationship to legacy, like I really, you know, I fuck with him for a lot of different reasons, but he really gets at that point of breaking like tradition and legacy that's like passed down that no longer serves, you know. And I think that that's like really important to think about when having these conversations about it. Yeah, that was like very winded, but
No, that's beautiful. I'm just, my shit is on like 2% though. So technical difficulties, you know.
really?
I have to pee, okay. But I always have to pee. Give me a second. Okay. Yes, Kolbi. Always with the gems. Now my skin clear. Um, First I want to say, when you like, I think of like not to toot my own horn, our own horn as Caribbean, you know, bed geltings. Um, there's also, I think one thing about, so this is something very specific to my neighborhood in the Bronx. Growing up in the Bronx, I've always felt negative emotions towards it, and I think I'm just young and wanting to be rich and realize, oh wait, different story. But I remember during the pandemic, I'm in the Bronx, right? And I just remember looking down. And mind you, it's like the end of the fucking world. Like, people are dying. Like, we know that, especially in the beginning, it's like, we don't know what this is. We're on lockdown. Like, everyone is just like low key, at least according to the news and what you see on the internet, is in panic. But looking downstairs, I was like amazed. Everyone was enjoying their life. Like, they were having barbecues, and honestly, it wasn't safe, but whatever. They're still here. No one, you know. So like they were still living. Like there was so much laughter and cheer and music, and the landlord had passed away recently, and he was sick for a long time. Shout out to him. Rest in peace to him. He was a good man, really good family man. And I remember, like, I think it was like Father's Day last year around this time, or like his birthday, something like that, where they had like a DJ on the block and they were like celebrating him. And I didn't know that. So it's like 4 buildings, and because people like have been living here for like decades, including my grandmother, all 4 of them like know each other like personally. So they'll like have a barbecue in this block, and someone would come on the street and eat a chicken, and trade. It's a very community based place, location. And there's something so I can't even have a word, like I guess significant, or just something. There's something like just it keeps me speechless that I took this for granted, or didn't see the beauty of how even during a pandemic we're still living our lives. It's predominantly Caribbean neighborhood, so like, and if you go on the internet over the years, you'll see like a hurricane, and there'll be like a video of someone like on a mattress like drinking rum. Like, I think because of colonialism and our history specifically for Caribbean folk, like we always find the joy in the worst times, like whether it's a pandemic, natural disasters, or I think of the time like my great grandfather died. I was in college with funeral home. We were talking, how we miss him, but like it's low key a party. Like my grandma was like, hey, like there's this constant joy and there's something about our culture that is very present. And I think a part of it is because of our history, because of, economically speaking, is the reason why we're so present. There is a very low employment rate in the Caribbean because of etc. of various things. But I don't know. I just sometimes like I look at like my family, the generation of Caribbean women, or the Caribbean women that I know personally. Like there's something so, I want to say I hate this word. I honestly don't know what the fuck it means. Sequential. There's something. It's like a spark. There's something about Caribbeanness that is such a valuable lesson, and I'm more and more as I get older and learn about other cultures, learn about Japanese culture. I'm so proud of where I come from, and just learn how, because of our histories, how we're shaped and formed generationally. And I think for me, watching Jujutsu Kaisen, it's a reflection of that. And then I want to know, like, what did the conversation look like? Like, what if I had went to breakfast with pink hair guy, whatever, Ikudoria and his grandfather, and invited my grandmother, and we had to talk about our differences. What would that look like? What would we learn? What would we disagree on? And what would we laugh about? You know what I'm saying? Like those are the type of things I'm interested in, because there's something to say um, about how our cultures are informed by our generations, by our legacies. And I think we've been, pretty negative about the goal, capitalism and materialistic, but there's something about legacies that are unspoken. And it takes a lot of discipline for you to open your eyes and just look down. That was the case for me during the pandemic. I looked downstairs and it was like a whole barbecue, typical Bronx shit, like hip hop, some soca, just everything. And I think that's, even though no one knows who these people are, they're gonna die and you'll forget them. Those present experiential moments of the legacy that we take for granted are unspoken. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful what you said about like legacy being unspoken. And I think that really gets at, kind of what I was saying about Akame got killed and like the end just being like nobody remembers them, but their legacy is unspoken. It's still there. It's still very much present. And I think about that in the same way that we're talking about, our cultural dynamics from, being West Indian. It's just like there's so much of that that's unspoken, so much of that where we don't know exactly what source created it, but it's so present, ever present within every fiber of our beings, within our lives, and it doesn't make it any less real because we don't know it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that's also really difficult for a lot of displaced African descendants is, you know, that unspoken legacy. Because, you know, for a lot of other cultures, you know exactly where that comes from. You know exactly, you know, who did what to make this a thing. But for us, we can't really say. We're just picking up the scraps of like what we think it might come from. But I think it's beauty in that unspokenness, in that it's so present throughout. Like I was watching what is it called on Netflix, High on the Hog or something, but it's a show that looks at food within like Black culture and the ways in which that links like everyone. So they started off in I think Benin, looking at the food, and then they went to like South in the South to look at their food and things like that, to see the connections and like why we call candy yams, even though what we're eating is really sweet potato here, and things like that. And just thinking about that, because like we don't know exactly who brought that here, exactly like we just don't. But there are certain fibers that link that legacy together, that link the legacy of, you know, the original roots in Africa to what we're doing now, or our original roots in, you know, the Caribbean to what we're doing now. And it's really beautiful, honestly, to see that. Even if we can't name that, you know, there's still beauty in it, even it being unnamed, you know.
I think of the like, even just like in Haiti, for example, there it's still kind of a thing. I don't know, but there's a, historically speaking, Haiti's known for like their rice trade, and they used to trade rice a lot, specifically with Louisiana. So when you go to Louisiana, there's a lot of Creole and French influences. So that literal trade during enslavement period and a little bit post had influenced the culture of Louisiana. Like this, it's interesting because it's like, yes, about capitalism, but also capitalism is very important too. And I think a lot of people are so, I think, I just hate everything binary. I believe in the gray so heavily, because this literal economic trade of rice between Haiti and Louisiana, both at some point, I guess, colonized, ruled, imperialized, whatever, by the French, had literally created a whole new generation of people, created new cultures, new identities. And there's something interesting about that. And I think that everything just is connected. And I think that in all to say, do whatever you want, do whatever you want. It's always going to be my motto. And I also want to say, last thing too is, we mentioned importance a lot, like legacy is being important. The question I want to ask, like, to who? Who cares? You're dead. Who cares? Secondly, like, and I was actually talking to a friend about this a few weeks ago. Well, like, specifically the entertainment industry, like, warning, problematic. You're not important. You're not. Like, I think too many people think they're important, or like, honestly, when someone, like, of course, celebrate yourself, but like when you make an accomplishment, which is dope, all of a sudden you think you're the most important person in the world. You're fucking not. You're not. People can live without your book. People can live without your movie. People can live without you. They can. They'll move on. All to say, understand that it's like, I saw this meme and it captured my, like, what I believe in so deeply. Like, nobody cares about you, but like, nobody cares about you. Like, that's amazing. That means live your life. That means do whatever you want. Because factually speaking, we're all gonna die one day, and people are gonna cry, sure, and they're gonna forget you and move on. Like, yes, for example, Michael Jackson, icon, a legacy, king of pop, literally across the world. Like, honestly, I'd be so surprised. There'd be people who don't speak a lick of English, and Michael Jackson is like the greatest inspiration for them. I'd be so surprised sometimes. Like, people from like across the world love Michael Jackson. Beautiful, but he's dead. Like, it's over. You know what I'm saying? Like, not to be, you know, insensitive, but it's just like the point that he's an example of, just for all of us, that you're not important. You're not. So realize like that's a good thing. That means to live your life. That means have agency. And I think also, I mean, I think we can like wrap it up a little bit, but legacy's always sense of celebrity culture too. And I think at least for my the way I view quote unquote these celebrities, they're just doing their job. The way they go on stage and have a schedule to meet so they can meet a certain, budget requirements so they can make a certain amount of money is the same thing you do at your 9 to 5. And I mean, I have this whole opinion on like mental health and social media, but I think this whole celebrity culture is obviously a point of economics since the 1920s to the film industry. It took a whole history behind it. Like literally they use celebrity culture to market movies. It's the whole marketing scheme. It just makes sense. I mean, look at Quibi, perfect example of using celebrities for marketing so they can get their product to sell and get more subscribers or whatever. I don't know what to say about that. But I don't know any of these celebrities. I don't know these people at all. They don't know me. But I can't imagine being a musician, for example, which I would God, and just loving music and just wanting to do this for a living and then having to make money, which is great, win-win. And then all of a sudden get this social responsibility to have a reputation, to constantly be on your people have eyes on you, to constantly be producing content, especially at this rate in this right now in this time. Like I can't imagine just growing up wanting to do music. You do it, but then all of a sudden, like you can't really live your life. Like you have to have security around you. You have to be careful where you go. You have to be careful with even friendships and family that might, So I personally, I can't speak to that, but I definitely empathize a lot because I think people forget they're freaking human. Like there's like a Jimmy Kimmel segment. It's hilarious, but also really scary and deeply concerning. Where there's a bunch of stories of like celebrities like taking shits at public restrooms and someone like coming under taking pictures of them. Like, first of all, disgusting. Why are you in the floor in a public restroom? Why do you want to go into someone's bathroom and taking a poop? Like it stinks, but here we are. But the point is just like just have celebrity culture, but I think that's something to do with legacy. It's to do with much more us. And yeah, I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna offend a lot of people, but let's stand on that.
Yes, girl, I agree. To wrap it up on my part, I think that so much of legacy is just out of our hands because it happens. A lot of it happens when you're gone, and you can't really control that. I think, the material version of legacy, that's like the one that we control the most, and so we feel really tied to because it's just like, well, I know that what I make what I make is what I make, period, boom, done. But when it's coming to these other like less tangible things, like what you leave behind, it is what it is. And what you think you leave behind may not actually be what you left behind. Like you may think you were the greatest human being ever, and then everybody's looking at you like, no, this bitch was trash, like actually garbage. And that we have to like be kind of okay with that, like in order to live lives fully, like, and that's okay too. Like, even I think I'm doing my best to live the best life I can, personally. But I think it's valid that, let's say hypothetically, I have, some kids or whatever, and later down the line, they look back and they're like, like great grandmother Kolbi was actually kind of fucked up in this way. And, that's valid. And I would kind of want them to be able to do that too, to be able to be like, hey, like what she left behind wasn't enough. We shouldn't take this forward. And that's powerful too, being able to shape the continuation of legacy or the ways in which you adapt the legacy that's left to you, that's beautiful too, and that's valid. I don't think my legacy, if I leave one, will be perfect, and that's okay. And I think that's something that people have to be okay with. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be necessarily what you envision. And you have to allow that to be, because other people are going to create their own legacy, their own past as well.